Welcome to Iron Sights. This podcast candidly seeks to create opportunities and deliver impact by sharing the experiences and wisdom of successful entrepreneurs and thought leaders who unapologetically aim to win in health, fitness, business, and life. I'm your host, Scott Howell. Welcome to Old School Meets New School. Tradition meets innovation, and imperfection meets excellence. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I want to welcome Mike Potenza. He's the veteran strength and conditioning coordinator for the San Jose Sharks, just blocks from us here at RDF and ISP HQ. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, buddy, I'm so stoked. I don't get it. We don't get a lot of opportunity to sit down, and we've sat down a few times. I feel privileged to be here. I'm super excited about today.
Well, I think I've made it because you called me a veteran, and it's not just because of my my salt and pepper hair and gray beard, I guess.
I'm winning that competition for those of you that are watching on the gray side of things. But yeah, man, I'm pumped to have you here. We're neighbors essentially,
right.
And there's so much work that gets done every day. It's hard to kind of find time, and you made some time for me today. So pumped. I know I'm going to take a lot out of today, and I'm certain the people that are listening will too. So thanks for your time, buddy. Just a little bit on you, and then we'll kind of dive right in. Okay. So for those of you who don't know who Mike Potenza is, he's an East Coaster by origin, Providence, Rhode Island, right?
Yep.
Right. And then it'll be no surprise that you spent quite a bit of time sort of in your growing up through your career there, getting your graduate study master's degree out of Boston U, yep. Right? And then you spent some time down south, University of Miami. Then it looks like you came back, sort of spent some time at Harvard and Colgate, which I didn't know that. That's interesting. And it wasn't all just hockey.
No, that was hockey was my main responsibility only when I got to Wisconsin. And that was the previous stop before here in San Jose. So it's kind of a cool little snapshot of my life that you have to take as a young strength coach. You need to go where the jobs are. You need to keep on building the resume, climbing the ladder, earn more responsibility within your job title.
Right.
And that's how you climb it. It's not just like you get your diploma and like, hey, okay, great. You're the San Jose Sharks strength coach.
Yeah, it's time to do work.
I slept at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I'm fine.
So there's this traveling around, and it's not just hockey. There's other things going on there, and there's this constant like education process that's happening, right? Yeah. So what are some of the other sports that you've dealt with or spent some time in? What'd you love? What'd you hate?
Yeah, well, it's funny because baseball was one of my major responsibilities as an undergraduate at Springfield College. That was where I got my bachelor's degree from in exercise science, and Springfield is, the mecca of strength and conditioning education if you want to go that route in a curriculum. And UConn's awesome as well. There's a bunch of small schools in New England that have exercise science programs, but Springfield was the one that I knew, I want to do this. Like, this was my passion. And, during my time at Springfield, I made it a point to do different internships in the summertime. So my first one was Boston University as a sophomore, met Mike Boyle, met Glenn Harris, the director. I think we talked about this at one point. And then I, my junior summer, went to IPI, which is now known as Exos, with Mark Verstegen.
Oh, right.
We were the last class of interns before he moved to Tempe to make API, and then they evolved into Exos because they're massive, right? So
what a lineage.
Yeah.
Those are OGs right there. Right? And if you're old school, strength coach, but if you're old school in performance training, period, then you know those names. Yeah. Those are not unknowns at all. Wow, what a
great stops for me. Like
I can imagine.
People talk about you got to build your network, but I think I was blessed to have a lot of those experiences. We talked about Miami and having that experience, but that I don't know what phrase to put it in, but it's bigger than just saying I've built a network. It's there are people there I still lean on with questions, concerns, non-training challenges like getting high-end athletes to work, or convincing a general manager we have to go this route, spending this amount of the budget.
Right. So, those are the real struggles, challenges, and day-to-day that happens as a strength coach that probably a lot of people, most people don't realize until you're into it. And particularly the young up and coming coach who's, just wants to get out there and, and get people stronger and faster. There's so much more to that. Kind of peel back some of those layers. And going back to the Boyle thing, and Verstegen thing, I mean, those, again, they're cutting edge then, and they're even stayed in front then. So, God, what an opportunity for you.
Yeah.
As you're up and coming. Go back to the Miami thing real quick. What is it that you were most involved with when you were at Miami?
Football. I was hired as an intern for football, so that was my big football experience. I mean, Springfield had a football program. It was D3. It was very competitive.
Yeah, but that's no Miami Hurricanes.
No,
man.
It's not like D1. Like you have these Taj Mahals of gyms and facilities and fields, and it was Miami football. So you had alumni coming through. Adrian James working out with us, Cortez Kennedy coming back to work out. I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So,
man, what an I guess like this stepping off point or jumping off point to you get an internship, which we'll talk about how important those things are. And you're already alluding to how important that was and is in your development. But
that experience too, because if we don't cover it, I'll kill myself at home.
Let's cover it.
I kill myself at home if not mentioning it. That team was unbelievable. They ended up winning the national championship at Flying Fall.
What year are we talking about?
That was I went there the spring of 2000. So that was the class of like Santana Moss, Ed Reed, Ken Dorsey, Clinton Portis, Dan Morgan, like
all
you
pros.
name it.
All
that
pros.
was the team that set the record for the most first round draft picks, right? The following spring. But the best part about it was culture. Like that team worked. Every one of those guys worked. No matter how big their name was, it was super competitive. They knew they wanted to win a national championship. They knew the collection of guys they had. So it was my first exposure to, culture. How is that going to impact what we do in the gym and what you need for a team to be successful? It was awesome. I'm glad I picked up on it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, did you know it at the time, or was it just something that you realized after the fact?
I knew it was a good collection of athletes. So and you could see that on paper, but the head strength coaches at the time, one was Rob Phillips, who took over for Tom Moffitt, who that went to LSU, and then another co-head strength coach came in, Andrew Swayze, who was continuous. He was there for a long time. Rob ended up going to the Cleveland Browns with Butch Davis a year later after they won the national championship. So just a little background, but Rob and Andrew Swayze told me straight out, he's like, this is what we're trying to do with the culture of this team. And I was like, oh, okay. Like that's something they don't teach you in the books.
No, you can never learn that unless you're there and you have those kind of mentors.
And teams need that. If you watch the most successful teams, they'll allude to that in the media about culture, and you'll hear little things or read things in the media about a team's particular culture. It's not one man or one woman that's going to win it for a team.
Right.
So it was pretty cool.
Right on. I mean, that's a gem.
I mean,
you young coaches out there, pay attention.
Yeah.
You could only be so lucky.
Well, because exactly. Because you may not be, your job's not always going to be to train somebody to get bigger, stronger, or faster. Right. It's going to be to train them to be a good pro or be a good teamate.
Or how about just to show up to practice and work hard?
Pull the rope in the right direction. Right. So
yeah, it's not just weight rooms and force plates. Let's get that thing just a hair closer to you. Like just pull that arm in. There you go. Cool. Right on. Okay. So moving forward, the next thing I want to talk about just sort of in that collegiate career is where hockey really started for you. And that was kind of like, I would assume the beginning, but can we just take a little trip backwards a little bit? Did you play hockey as a kid?
I did. Yeah. 9 to 12. My older brother played from the same ages, and then I ran out of his equipment. I just kind of pivoted. It was expensive for a single mom, and I was like, I'll play lacrosse, baseball, and soccer. So
yeah, that whole culture of hockey is different in a couple of different ways. But you made your way to Wisconsin, and were you hired as the head coach at that point?
So they were looking for a head hockey strength and conditioning coach for men's and women's hockey, and I had a great connection and with the assistant coach there, played at BU, so he worked with Boyle. And luckily, Mike is a great friend and mentor, so my connection with him gave me a reference to that coaching staff. And then, waited about 6 months because I was at Colgate at the time, And then once they finished the season, they wanted to have a head guy there, and then they hired me there. So
the power of relationships.
Oh yeah, and again, network relationships. You're right. To have a guy like Mike go to bat for me for that position, it really kickstarted everything.
Right, and then of course you're putting in work the whole time, so your relationship only gets you so far. You got to be. You have to do the work. You have to be successful.
Yeah.
You guys were so successful. You won an NCAA championship there.
Yep. We won. Yeah. And women in the same year.
Yeah.
So it was tremendous. And again, culture came back to that team. We had and that team, before I got there, they had some extreme failure. They had the worst season in school history the year before I got there, but it was all about getting them back to, we're going to be the fittest team. We're going to be the toughest team to play against.
Fundamentals.
And that was the new coaches. Mike Eves at the time was a great man and great coach to learn from for me. That was his theme. That was what we wanted to accomplish. And, I was able to do that on the strength side.
So important to mention there, it wasn't just the men's hockey team. It was the women's hockey team as well.
My responsibilities were men's and women's hockey, wrestling, and softball. So to go back to what I've worked with in the past, it's been every team, but at Wisconsin, it was those 4 teams, and they were great teams, like such great workers on the women's softball side, and the wrestling team's the wrestling team. Like they were going to go through the wall regardless if I was there or not, but setting up another wall behind the one they just went through,
right?
They were able to do that
too. Yeah.
So
and stretch it out. Yeah, I think my partner Cece would chime in if she could and tell you how important her relationships and the mentorship and the leadership that she had at University of Tennessee. She was mentored by Jenny Moshak, who at the time was the head ATC for the women's program, and was the right hand of Pat Summitt for the women's basketball program and everything that was going on there.
What a coach to learn from there, huh?
I mean, how blessed, were you to have those people and then have the experiences. I mean, hey, winning a national championship is not an easy thing to do, and not everybody gets to experience that. You got 2.
Right.
Yeah. In the same year.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Oh, I should have played Powerball that
year. True. So how long were you at Wisconsin before ultimately coming to the Sharks?
Going on my 4th season. And I think I got the itch to interview more so than anything. Like, it was funny. Let me tell you a long story as to the reason why I was more interested in interviewing for NHL jobs and not wanting to leave Wisconsin because it's such a tremendous place, and a good friend of ours, obviously Joe Pavelski and his wife Sarah, Joe was a freshman when we recruited him, and he was a great friend since he was a freshman. So my second year actually, but I didn't want to leave Wisconsin. I wanted to see what I wasn't prepared for in the NHL, right? So how can I continue to get better at my little spot in Wisconsin and getting these players to go to the NHL, preparing them properly, talking to NHL strength coaches, getting them ready for development camps, that summer rookie camp that I think we've done in the past. And so it was more of a preparation thing. And if it was a really good deal, okay, I would go, But it wasn't like, for me, I needed to be in the NHL. I didn't have that urge, but I did want to know myself, okay, I can do that job up there, So the long story starts when I never practiced or took advantage of the career center at Springfield College. I never prepared for an interview. So then I get my master's done at BU, and I'm like, okay, I got to interview for jobs. And I'm getting recommended for University of Vermont head strength coach job. I'm 23 years old at the time. And UNH, University of New Hampshire, which has a huge athletic department, right? Program, so I'm interviewing for the head position for that. So that has big time basketball, big time women's sports, big time hockey, and football, 1AA football. So 23 years old, going in, trying to field all these questions. I'm in a room of 35 coaches and staff. Then I'm in a room of 10 administrators, and then I'm in a room of 50 athletes. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for these interviews and this preparation.
Good.
A lot of failure.
Good.
A lot of mistakes.
Good.
Yeah. Kind of held my own, but I think at the time you just can't see the seasoning. And that's fine. Like I understood that. I understood. Okay, I got to get better at this. So I always felt like I needed the practice. So then I went. At the time, I was working at Harvard and Colgate. So then I went to HR and did practice interviews, so I can get better at that aspect of preparing.
Wait, time out for a second, Joe. What I got to know is like, was somebody encouraging you to do this, or was this?
No, it was just, I think you can draw a lot of parallels from what we do and the habits that we have in terms of work ethic. Work ethic runs parallel to what you do as a business owner, what we promote to our clients or athletes. And okay, if I need to work at something, which is generally our fitness or our performance, then okay, I got to apply it to something I'm bad at, like preparing these interviews.
Or why would it be any different?
Writing was another thing I didn't feel confident in. I wasn't a good writer as a student, and it took me a lot in college to become a good writer. And I had two really good professors at Springfield who helped me kind of work through that, And so I just I felt I needed to get better at that. So let's put it that way.
Right. So it's about this endless pursuit of excellence and being and working hard to get there, not being afraid of failure. Right. Like, okay, like I'm definitely not prepared for this. I learned from that. Where does that come from? Where does the work ethic and the preparation for failure and knowing what to do with that failure come from for you?
I don't know. Like I mean, my parents and whole family is blue collar work and work until you're dead, and then get up and work some more. So I guess that's where it starts. But again, along the way, we've talked about I've had guardian angels and great mentors, and one of the guys, it was actually at Wisconsin when it really hit me, was their assistant coach, who's now an NHL head coach for the Nashville Predators. He was relentless in his work ethic, just able to look at a lot of different areas and make himself better and a better coach. And then that assistant coach, who was a great American League head coach and then an NHL assistant, that gentleman, Troy Ward, has always pushed me to, okay, don't just think in your little box of strength and conditioning. And that's where I really got the preparation of it. Like, he showed me interview booklets that he did for other NHL teams. I'm like, oh my God. I'm coming in with a resume and a reference list, and I got nothing else. But he's got a phone book of strategic plays and for different situations and how he wants the guys to dress on the bus. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to reproduce that. And strength coaches love sharing, I think.
It's a strong community.
Yeah, they love sharing, the newest manual. Oh, I got Buddy Morris's manual from the Cleveland Browns back in 2002, Like, everybody loves to share those texts, right? And I was able to get my hands on a couple head football coaches' manuals. I got Lou Holtz's manual for when he prepared for the South Carolina job.
Wow.
So when I just got it, so I won't say where. I don't know who's listening.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It was long enough ago, and I think Lou wouldn't mind at this point. But I got my hands on it, and I'm like, okay, there's a level of preparation with the best coaches.
Right.
And so that's my long story, I guess, on how I really needed to get better at the interview process. And I guess I did, because I impressed San Jose enough to it's funny, because 2 months earlier I had an interview with the Arizona Coyotes, and it didn't go well. The hardest seasoned guy, and then I guess I impressed Doug Wilson here. So
wow, and then there's a lot of history there. We'll kind of dig into a little bit, but just in this whole experience, you just kind of walked through things that you were challenged yourself to do better at, and you had these mentors. And by the way, these mentors that you're with, or that you're getting these experiences and this support from, I've had a lot of great ones too. And here's what I learned about those mentors: they don't waste their time with people that aren't going to put in the work and the dedication and the commitment, and are afraid or doing half-ass of anything. So I think that probably speaks to you as a coach and as a person, that anything that was put in front of you, you were going to take on the challenge. As a new coach, as a new intern, even coming in or getting into the world of strength and conditioning, knowing that was your passion and this is what you wanted to do, what are some of the things that might surprise a young coach that you had to do, or that you had to be involved with or get good at, like in your very early days? I'm a pack rat. So I still have all my projects and books from undergrad and grad, so I look back when my wife Bonnie starts yelling at me to throw stuff out, I dig into the box and nothing goes anywhere. But I see like programs I wrote at Springfield, and I didn't know I didn't have any idea how to write a program in the beginning, my freshman year, but I did my
observation, my 150 hours of observation and mentoring from the graduate assistant strength coaches that were at Springfield. So, and then I got confident at it. And my advisor, Margaret Jones, who's an amazing woman, she got her PhD from University of Georgia in exercise science, and she built Springfield up to put it on a high level amongst the strength and conditioning community. And now she's at George Mason. But Margaret pushed me, and Margaret challenged me, and she kind of, I think, tried to put a little doubt, to challenge me, and it was rewarding, and so she said, okay, you gotta learn how to program, and I'm gonna give you rowing, and you're gonna, and women's tennis, and so you're gonna cut your teeth there. I'm like, okay, great, So early on it was programming and how it flowed, how it looked, was it right for the sport demands and all that kind of stuff, and I was very much into Vern Gambetta at the time, and he was always systematically talking about building and rebuilding in the athlete and how to follow that construct and things like that, and my coaching cues, I've always thinking about refining them. Can I do less with, or do more with words than, tactile touch and positioning, there is a need for that sometimes, but can you explain it? Can you not spoon feed them all the way with your coaching cues and give them the answers to the test, but can they find it, physically?
Right.
Do they have the physical sense to adjust themselves in certain ways and things like that? But, there's always something to get better at. Like this, and it evolves so quickly now, right? Like Mike Boyle was talking about speed training. It's like he just found it out, But so he's going back and refining that in his work. Other coaches are going back and looking at conditioning in a different way, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's Dan Baker's work that comes out with max aerobic speed or whatever. And even data, like we're looking at data in a different way rather than just putting everything together on Excel and say, here you go, here's the results. The top guys are at the top and the bottom guys are at the bottom.
Right.
So there's so many different areas to get better at. You can definitely chase your tail on what you need to do, but
it's hard to know kind of what are the right things to focus on. But before I ask you that, like, did they just let you right into programming? Like, what were some of what are some things that, a young, aspiring strength and conditioning coach has to do? And I'll be honest, when I became a coach for the first time, one of the very first tasks that was asked of me is like, go grab that mop and go clean the locker room. Wait. I just want to be a personal trainer.
Exactly.
Right. So go grab that mop and go clean the locker room.
Yeah, exactly. See those protein shakes? They got to go in the fridge.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Scott, I think that's a given. You know what I mean? Like I knew at the time it was a given, so I didn't care. Like, okay, this has got to be done. There's nobody else. There's no cleaning crew to come in. We got to keep this place. I'm a neat freak in a way already, so it's like, all right, we got to keep this place neat, safe. Whether that be sanitization or whether it be just putting things away. That's a given. And we had a small weight room at Springfield, so to be introduced to that area, it's like, all right, it's got to be really efficient to get all these 25 Division III, sports, men and women
teams right through there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think there's an appreciation lost for that kind of stuff. Young strength coaches these days have to understand that's part of it.
There's a grind
because like if I get an intern and he scoffs at the fact like, hey, I need you to, every Friday you're cleaning the gym and you're stocking fridges every night and blah blah blah, and if I get the eye roll, the scoff, I'm like, if you have a business and at the end of the day, you want to go home and somebody needs to fill the fridge, would you want to stay and do it? Or, I put it in that light. It's like, it has to be done and you have a staff to do it, and it's not fun, but it's part of it. It's part of
the job.
It's part of the keeping the ship moving in the right direction. Like everybody ropes, everybody rides, so maybe it's me tomorrow that fills the fridge, but right now it's you and we need you to do it. And that's just what it is.
Right, it's part of it.
Exactly. There hasn't been an experience that I've gone through that I haven't had a shitty job. Right. But it just needed to be done.
It's just part of the thing.
Yeah. Right. And life teaches you kind of I'm going to get on a little quick soapbox for you, but I took a job as helping my dad's friend with his landscaping business. And he was the boss, and rode with him in the truck every day. Third day on the job, we're picking weeds, right? In flower beds. And I'm saying to myself, this sucks. Like, this sucks. Like, I'm sweating. It's humid. It's Rhode Island. The mosquitoes are as big as birds. Like, it's like, And I said, his name was Bill. I said, Billy, weeding sucks, huh? He looks at me, he goes, you won't last a week. I said, what do you mean? He's like, you won't last a week. If this minuscule job is pissing you off that much, you won't last a week. I said, I'm going to finish the summer. He goes, you won't. He goes, you won't. And he bet me $100. And I was like, okay, it's on. And I start picking weeds. And I said, Mr. Raynone, who was his name, Mr. Raynone, I said, when I say goodbye at the end of the summer, it's not because I'm trying to spite you. Understand that. He goes, no, I know your father. I know you're gonna. Yeah. So that was one thing. And then when I was at Miami, we had shake dispensers, right? And CC would probably appreciate this from being at Tennessee. You have big shake dispensers and Gatorade dispensers. So we had to mix the shakes.
Right. It comes in a powder.
So we put the powder in the paint bucket, took the big.
Yeah, you look like the old lemonade maker at the hot dog on a stick back there.
Yeah. And then we pour it in, you know? So it was like, all right, this is what we got to do. Like this is how the ship is going to run.
That's strength and conditioning.
Yeah, that's
what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, hey, it's just part of it. Like, you know, and I use the analogy of like, I challenge the younger strength coaches or interns saying, when you have a business, you're going to need these things to run.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of firefighters in my family, and my cousin's 5 years older than me, and he was a firefighter for 16 years. But when we talk about this stuff too, he's like, there's a saying on the fire department, grab a rag. Yep. If you're standing around, grab a rag, because something needs to be wiped down, something needs to be cleaned, something needs to be done. So you always have to be kind of thinking in that light.
Yeah, so. It's a shame that people don't learn that till late in the game, and they maybe burn bridges or just made poor decisions in rec relationships or whatever, because they don't realize that up front.
Yeah, they don't get it.
Yeah, it's kind of we're at a time, it's kind of weird where it seems there's a little bit more, but that might just be my old ass being an old ass. You know, I sound like my dad.
We don't. But I know what you mean. Like I feel like that now. I'm like, geez, you know, like how do these kids not get it? Like this was what I did when I was young, and this is kind of, we see this is as a necessity of climbing the ladder or being part of it. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if we were young and the old asses were yelling at us, was it the same thing?
I know I hated it, but I also knew this, and this dawned on me at a fairly young age, and I'm going to say high school, and right about my sophomore year of high school. So I was about 15, 16 years old, and I'd had a coach who was yelling all the effing time. I mean, constantly yelling, berating kids, and I'm going to say to go as far as demeaning them, you know, and maybe in his mind, that was how he thought he was going to motivate kids. And I'm sure it worked for some, but it didn't work for me. Right. And I hated it. Mm-hmm. And I resented him. I didn't resent the game of football, but I resented him. Mm-hmm. Then I applied myself. I didn't let it stop me. Spent every day in the weight room. You know, I spent time on the track training when nobody else was. And I got hooked up with the varsity football coach, and I was asked as a sophomore to come up to play varsity football. I was the only sophomore on that team. And what I recognized is this guy did as much yelling and spitting and sweating as the other guy, but it was all very focused and it was all for a purpose. Mm-hmm. And I recognized real fast, and the same with the strength, he was a strength and conditioning guy by heart too. He was an ex-NFL pro, he was an ex-wrestler, collegiate wrestler. My point of that was, if he wasn't yelling at me, I was worried. Yeah. Like, because when he was, it was all very productive. It was all very, direct and in a way to help me be better. Mm-hmm. And it never hurt my feelings. Right. You know, I didn't always like it, but it didn't hurt my feelings. And I just, whatever coach says, I know I trust him. Yeah. You know, and if he's not yelling and spitting and eyeballing me funky, that means he doesn't care anymore, and that's bad. Yeah. Like, I don't want that. Now, God bless it, if we hurt somebody's feelings, we get canceled. So,
I know, exactly. But it causes you to think, like, in your coaching, like, you have to be able to, I look at it more now because of the range of athletes I have to work with in terms of age, like 18 to 40. Right. So it's like, okay, and who do I need to yell at? Yeah. You know, I got to yell at some older guys, you know, and I don't have to yell at some younger guys. And then there's the flip side of it. You know, they have to be challenged sometimes. So, you know, how do you polish your coaching skills to know, rather than a shotgun approach, is like, I'm going to be the yeller or I'm going to be the passive guy. You know, like there's just, you got to turn it on and use different strategies to motivate guys.
It goes back to the culture too. So that's interesting. We talked sort of about, you alluded to the business of strength and conditioning coaching, or being a strength and conditioning coordinator. I mean, can you tell us, Mike, what is the role of the strength and conditioning coordinator at an NHL team like the Sharks? What is it how do you define that? What is it that you do? I mean, because it sounds like, oh, well, he's the guy that gets them stronger, and faster and bigger.
Yeah, right. 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, we wouldn't need to define all the different roles now that are involved. You have a director, director of strength and conditioning is the same thing as a director of performance per se. I mean, it's just a matter of how much leadway and leadway that your team gives you to have who you have underneath your department, right? So I'm the director of strength and conditioning, the head strength coach, the assistant strength coach, the intern, the bottle filler, the nutritionist.
The bottle filler?
The
shake machine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
still doing it.
We joke about it. My assistant Steve and I are like, and we're movers. We're counselors. So you're doing everything. But I guess my immediate role is to make sure that we have the reconditioning process dialed in for the injured athletes. We have an assessment process dialed in to capture preseason, postseason, development camp, combine testing scores to evaluate and then share with management, right? We're tracking workloads on the ice and meeting with coaches for practice planning purposes. We set forth the training program, and we basically set the structure of what we want to do for the minor leagues too, because I have a strength coach down there that heads that up. So you wear a bunch of different hats. If I could, I would have massage therapy under me, right? I think in our world that we need those quick fixes mechanically, and we need some long-term fixes as well. But under our structure, that's in a different department, right? And that's fine. And I think the gray area that my position kind of would oversee, if possible, would be physical therapy, because that we would work with them on the assessment side and the reconditioning side for the athlete. We have a physical therapist now that we consult with, and I do work very close with him. But I guess when you talk about that performance department or that performance enhancement area of a pro team, that's how kind of would shape it, really.
And there's so many variables there, and you touched on so many things just in that sort of overview synopsis in terms of critical skills that are needed in order to make you valuable and continue to make yourself valuable to the team, to the organization, to the players, to the coaches. And, there's leadership. Yep. You have to be a leader, right? There's communication skill. Yeah. There's organization skill.
Managerial skills.
Having to balance the different emotions, the different attitudes, the different things that are going on throughout the year.
You got to you have to have also too, be a little bit of a, I'm
like a jack of all trades kind of thing?
I'm drawing a blank on the word, but you have to be able to see things coming.
You got to anticipate.
Really good at anticipation, because my weight room's changed 3 times based on how we've evolved the program. When I first came in, the first 3 years was like, okay, let's get my structure in here. And that included getting rid of equipment, communicating with the guys, testing a different way, and doing an in-season program a new way that everybody was exposed to, right? And then it's like, okay, now we've made that evolution. Now we need to get new equipment in, like that
to execute
that fits our training style. And now it's okay. Now we're on a different level of looking at evaluations, individual programming and prescription. And so that you have to look ahead too. You have to, and it is a skill, but you also have to look ahead, but not just change with the tides. Just because the K box is out there doesn't mean you need 50 of them. You know what I mean? Where does it fit in your program? And everything has to come back to your main purpose is getting guys stronger and fit and resistant to injury. You can't lose that. You can't have a shitty strength program, but you deliver the best reports,
right? Right.
Like, no, you can't, don't do that. I'd fire myself if that was the case. So.
Yeah. It's, there's being able to have foresight or anticipation comes from wisdom, which comes from knowledge and experience of having done this rep after rep. Is just having that conversation with the last guest, Jason Kalipa, and you don't know until you've done it. So you just have to do it and do it and do it. And there's a lot of other things that go into that because you know what's happening, but you have to communicate these things down or up, and manage those types of things. I got to ask, it was a very eventful 2020 and 2021. And as a professional coach, in a league that went ahead and operated, and they were on the forefront of this thing. Hockey was right out there in front. NHL was trying to get this,
shut down.
Right. Yeah. And we're trying to push. Talk about some of the challenges. I mean, obviously there's a ton of them, but talk about some of the challenges that you couldn't have anticipated, that when they arrived, you just had to, we had to make do with what we had. And here's some of the things. Give me some examples.
When we were officially shut down and everybody left and went home, the programming, getting everybody, some sort of program that can keep them going with the thought that, okay, we could come back. It wasn't for about 2 or 3 weeks that they said, okay, we're just going to do the playoff teams, right? And the guys who didn't make it, or they were under a certain amount of points, you guys were out.
Yeah, what a wacky time.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, I got to deliver all these different programs. Some guys have a bike and dumbbells. Some guys have full access to a home gym.
Sounds like our clients.
Yeah. So it was all over the map. So we were scrambling, writing 3-week phases, getting everybody organized, and then we take a breath, and it's like, okay, we got to write another 3-week phase.
It's changing again.
Yeah. So that took a lot of energy and effort. Didn't think it was going to be like that, but I didn't realize how many players we actually did have, or how many guys don't have stuff at their house, because when they were all shut out of their personal gyms, and strength facilities. But that was interesting. Coming back, kind of on a good side, we had to split the groups up. So our coaching ratio went from 2 to 25, then down to 2 coaches for 10 athletes, which so we had 3 groups of 10.
So you could only have 10 athletes in front of you at any given time throughout the day.
Sanitize, and then next group comes in. Okay. Sanitize, next group. So I didn't mind that, actually.
Yeah, it gives you, it's like small group training now instead of...
We worked on some more detailed things. We were bigger pains in the ass and to each guy and got on for, more details, but it was good. I may move forward with that and go with the small group training. Right. We did in the past, we split it up, older guys.
Also, that's interesting. So what you're saying is you kind of like that format. Yeah. And you saw some things there that might be beneficial moving forward. It's kind of maybe changes the paradigm,
especially in training camp, because now when you got, our space is 2,500 square feet. So when you have 30 guys in training camp at once, you can't have them there. You know the challenges. So we're limited. We have 4 squat stations for 30 guys. So we have to, if we go down to 2 groups of 10 or 2 groups of 15, then we're golden.
Yeah, people might be shocked to hear that about how much space you have and don't have in order to train a professional hockey team.
Right. Yeah, we don't have enough. You never have enough.
Yeah, and it's in hockey, what I've found in my experience with the athletes and the families and the coaches as well, is hockey is a bit different on a lot of levels with that in regard. I mean, you're coming from from a major collegiate football program or even an NFL program, these massive facilities. I mean, you got teams with 60, 70, 100 people on them, whatever, including support staff, and they have all this space and fancy stuff. But in the NHL, you're at a hockey rink.
Yeah.
And so you're stuck, and we was joking about this with one of my other strength and conditioning buddies about, we're always stuck in the basement.
Yeah.
We're always in the basement, stuck in the corner, somewhere, and we're trying to make do with what we have. Yep. So again, you just said kind of 4 squat stations for all you guys. You got to make it work. You have to be nimble, and you have to. And
hopefully the Sharks facility was, at the time when it was built, it was new, one of the newer ones in the.
We're talking back at 2000 and.
No, like that one, the practice facility was, I think, late 90s, right? Or no, early 2000s. So it's 20 years old. But even though that was that was big for that time, it's now been surpassed. Right. So with the renovation going on over there, we'll get up to speed. But now you've seen game rinks have a real small gym, very little training post game, but now there's bigger footprints inside the new building. So our building's one of the older ones in the country, us in Boston. So, there needs to be a change there, and we've talked about it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, city ownership. Yeah. Because we would utilize it a lot more, in recovery areas and performance areas are that much more in demand now. It's that part of the game is bigger, and it's critical, and it's taken a while for hockey to catch on more so, but they're there now. So it's good.
So what's happening now in the off season? Because for the Sharks, season's over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we got some playoff stuff happening right now, but for the Sharks, we're done here.
Yep.
What's going on right now with you and the athletes? What are they getting from you? What are they not getting from you? What's the sort of the expectation?
So everybody's assigned a summer program, and it started Monday. So we're well into first phase, which is real easy per se. It's the theme is tissue remodeling, and Jim Schneider, a great friend of mine in Wisconsin who took over for me for hockey, is kind of themed that the block's name, and that's just basically get your body
it's a recovery period,
right?
And
periodization, very heavy
year.
GPP emphasis too. But we'll use isometric positions, posing for tissue length, right, and a little bit of kind of like hypoxic training for the lower body when we're in lunge position or whatever skating position we want to mimic. But we're also trying to recreate length, get them out of that skating position. Right.
So they're not spending time on the ice right now.
No, I encourage them not to.
No, don't skate.
Don't skate till July. And if you go on in July a couple times a week, just to maybe skill work where you're not doing laps or metabolic type work. You don't need that at that point.
Just reinforcing movement pattern.
Yeah, because we're 3.5 months away as of now from the start of training camp. So they're saying September 22nd would be the start of training camp.
Gotcha.
If everything goes well with the playoffs, hopefully. So we have a lot of time. You don't want to put them in a skating position all of a sudden now. Back, sports hernia, groin, hip. So we don't want to have to worry about that right now. They need time to get out of that position.
Well, yeah, while you hope to do well and you're in the playoffs and you make a Stanley Cup run, and you've been there and you've done this, there is some advantage to not doing that well and having your season end when it ends for everybody involved, but particularly for the athletes in terms of the recovery time. And people are always, you want your team to win the Stanley Cup or the Super Bowl or the World Series or whatever it is, the national championship, world champs. But that takes its toll.
It does.
And it does. And it limits the amount of time that you can get an athlete ready or that they can prepare themselves to come back and do it again. And
that when we did that, when we made our finals run, it was, the big question for me was like, okay, now you have a 3 month, generally 2 to 3 month off season.
Yep.
And then now you can't plug that directly into starting in the middle of July.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Like you can, so how do you can't jam, 5 pounds of shit into a 2 pound bag. Right?
Just use that same analogy this morning.
I say that? So,
I usually say 10 pounds in a 5 pound because that's what I.
We're different weight classes.
I never stop. Like it's just, oops.
Whoops, garbage bag.
Yeah, and then it just stinks and it's everywhere, and I got to clean it up.
We digress. Yeah. So, my idea was, okay, we still have to go through tissue remodeling more than ever, and then let's try to build strength and the power, and then into speed strength into October and into November. So the in-season program is 50% of what the ending summer program would be coming out of the Stanley Cup run.
Young coaches listen.
Yeah. So and we had great success with it. We made the playoffs that year. We lost to I remember the year after we went to the finals, we lost to Edmonton Oilers, and they were hot. They had Connor McDavid, otherwise known as Hockey Jesus. So, he's pretty good. Yeah, so, but we were strong enough to make our run and get a lot of wins. And I think that helped us. At least in my mind, it was logical enough to say, okay, I can't squeeze everything in, and we're going to put more of an onus on the in season, at least prior to December, on rebuilding these guys back up. And the coaches were on board for that. So it was good.
So, just going into, so you're getting a little bit of an advantage here, albeit it's a kind of a weird time with COVID and maybe some restrictions and limitations. But you just alluded it might not be so bad because you might actually have some advantage at working in the smaller groups. My specific question is what diagnostics are you utilizing beyond evaluating kind of skill and talent right at this point? What are you doing to establish baselines? And then how do you use those diagnostics through the remainder of the training program up into training camp and then into the season? What are you doing right now with the athletes and what exactly are you looking for?
Yeah. So let's start a preseason, and then we'll work our way so that you guys can get a whole snapshot of like the testing and assessment stuff. Right. So in preseason, we'll do our testing for speed. So it's a 10-yard sprint. We'll do power output test, which is on a WOD bike, typical wing gait, and then we look at sprint decrement. So not fatigue index, because fatigue index looks at your max power output and then your lowest, and then you draw a straight line. So it doesn't give anybody credit if they kick ass in the first 15 seconds and they end up at the same point as if somebody just did 1,500 watts and then dropped like
very subjective.
Dropped to the ground. So that sprint decrement is helpful to think about what capabilities the athlete has for power retention, in a way. So we look at that. We look at in the program while we're working back together late August, I'll look at 3 to 5 RM bench, 3 to 5 RM trap bar, 3 to 5 RM front squat, or any healthy pattern, bilateral squat pattern that the guys can perform. Those are not done on the preseason testing date, just because I don't want to do a strength test. I want to see it in the program. We can manipulate things a little bit. I got more control of it there.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because
Sure.
you're talking about world-class athletes here.
Yeah.
So going back to those specific tests, I mean, for some, they might just be really great athletes and they can sneak through a test,
Right.
and they can test really well from a numbers perspective.
And they have.
But the reality of it is that's not really telling you where the problems could lie.
Exactly.
Right? And what you might need to look out down the road, and how to program with and around and for those particular issues.
And that's exactly what it is, Scott. It's a profile to say, okay, where are your weaknesses, where are your strengths, and especially in the speed area and how you accumulate speed. We want to know that mechanically too. We have a version of a movement profile that includes some SFMA work, some PRI work, some functional movement screen. So, and then even like the Y balance test and simple like range of motion at the hip to tell us what hip arc looks like. If you have a hockey player who's seated at 90 and then this hip has great internal and external, and this one's stuck. I'm like, well, that's going to affect
That's going to be a problem.
That's going to affect our stride length.
Yeah, but at the same time, like if you put them in just a squat or in a trap bar or whatever, and you ask them to do a movement, you might not ever see that because they're great.
We may not.
They can do
You're
that.
right.
They're
You're
loaded.
right.
They can do that. It's not a problem.
Or we may see
A compensation
getting
pattern.
away from that side. So we want to know all that stuff, and then cater the program to what guys need, individualize it, I should say. So we do that intake on everybody, and then during the season, we're looking at that 3 to 5 RM bench or pattern that's safe for their upper body pressing. Sure. Some guys have to dumbbell based on old surgeries and things like that, and that's fine. And then we'll look at trap bar, we'll look at and then front squat, and then once we get halfway through, I switch it because I'm checking bar velocity at the same time. Yep. So then I'll use that whole 3-month beginning of the in-season to say, okay, what's our highest velocities at our highest loads? And then we're going to achieve those velocities with maybe ratchet it down a little bit on the loads, but we still want those velocities. Mm-hmm. So we have to be strategic at when we get in those intensities, right? Those heavy loads for guys. And when we do, it's very low volume. It's not prep Lynch char. It's not Burger Shank.
You're not trying to beat the shit out of somebody, right? You're trying to understand where are the leakages in power, right? Yep. Where are the leakages in movement, right? Or mechanics and quality of movement, so that you can program specifically for these guys, right? And communicate it, right? What's the how do you get the buy-in from the players, right, with this stuff? Because I imagine, and I've had some conversations, but I imagine some guys are coming into this, maybe they're younger guys or maybe they're coming from other teams, and this might be very new to them. There's not necessarily congruency between leagues, between organizations in the NHL. I mean, we're talking about players that have come from all over the world that are playing, right? There's not necessarily like this is what we do. Mm-hmm. That might have been what you did there, but we're doing it differently here. Yep. How do you get buy-in from the players on how important this stuff is? How do you communicate it to them?
Yeah, I relate the game and their role in the game and then their testing scores into how can we build you up or make you better or not make you, if you're a veteran, not make you lose anything, because when you're a veteran, you're going to lose speed, power, qualities, right? Because you're getting older.
Just happens.
So and you're still playing a certain kind of game, or you're in a new system, you have to play this kind of game. So you can utilize this, and we haven't in the past and been successful with it. let's put this into your program.
Just strength and weaknesses. Yeah. Like this is not something you're going to be able to do at that level anymore. And we have to make adjustments. Otherwise you're now obsolete.
Exactly. Yep. So, and then with the young guys, it's they're coming in and you don't get enough young guys thinking, okay, well, I gotta relearn things. They think they have it figured out in a way for the game that's played at college surprise. Yeah. So it's like you're coming into a system that is very physical, and you were a perimeter player to begin with, and you didn't get in a lot of battles, with guys who were 230 pounds, and are
coming at you full speed ahead.
8-year veterans and some of the best in the league. So you better be prepared. So that's an easy sell to them. Right.
I don't want to get my ass kicked.
Yeah. They won't. Yeah. You're not going to get it like in a fight.
That's not what I meant.
But like if you're in a corner and you're going
and being dominated,
and you have to escape out of that corner or make a play out of it, or if you're in our defensive zone and you lose it and they're driving it right up our ass,
no worse feeling than being dominated by another human being. And until you've been in that position, you don't know what that feels like, whether that's in hockey, football, jiu-jitsu, a fight on the street or whatever.
Totally.
It's very scary.
Yeah. So I relate those three different areas, what we're seeing in testing, what our demands are in our team, or what's our team identity and how do we have to mimic that? And then their game and what they may be losing physically at the time. Right.
So what are some of the things when you're taking a new player and particularly I think a new player that's come to the team, maybe from a free agent or, a new draft pick or something like that that's come up, or somebody that's coming up from sort of the farm program. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you learn about them during that time you get to spend with them in that process outside of the data?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're picking up as a coach during that time?
Yeah. I remember Boyle saying, if you have somebody, their bench, take 25 pounds off. If they tell you I can do, 300, for a single.
Take down to 275.
Yeah, it's 275. And I was like, okay.
Okay.
Makes sense. That's safe.
So they want to compete.
I think so.
Or maybe they don't.
Maybe. I think they just inflate the numbers to think, their 300 may be not touching their chest. It may not be as strict as we want them. What do we want them to do?
Right. So you're trying to keep it safe, but you're also trying to avoid the ego lifting.
Right. So in our world, I want to make sure I do kind of an intake. Like, what's your injury history? Tell me a little bit about your training background. What did you do with this particular coach? What did you do with this particular team, whether it be a college team or Canadian junior team, or maybe we get a guy from a different NHL team. So once I do that, take him through the workout, and then I can kind of see it's like, I'm glad I brought your bench down to 275 because you told me you can Olympic lift and you can't get your elbows through on a clean, right? So so that I do that. I kind of look at everything with that 270. What are you bench analogy? You know? So, and that's where we have to those are the things we have to kind of clean up because they're going to be mainstays in our program. And if it's a guy who's like, I got a history of a low back, I got a history of a knee, then it's like, okay, we'll find a squat strategy that's going to
work
best fit your legs, and that may be, that may be step up, that may be EMS type work, with complex or something, but we'll find them a strategy.
Yeah. I imagine, I guess what I was kind of alluding to is also you're finding out about the player's psyche, are they, how competitive are they? How into their own programming and taking care of themselves and getting better as an athlete are they?
Yeah, that jumps out.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to imagine you can see it, right? As a spectator, as a fan, you see it on this dude's full of himself,
right. Yeah.
While he's a great athlete, he clearly doesn't have the buy-in from his teammates. And this happens in any level, amateur to professional on any type of team.
Right.
And again, they can pass a test, no problem, but they're the locker room, right? And in, I guess, the respect that they may have for their teammates and those teammates might have for them and their coaching staff and the program and the system and where they fit into that system as a team player. I'm sure from a strength coach perspective, you're going to see things because you get to spend, and it's not a ton of time, but you do get some concentrated time with these guys.
And you got to do reference checks. Like I'll call their old strength coaches, and find out what kind of guys.
Oh,
does he work hard or, and some it's like, okay, you're dead on, or some of them like, you've kind of fluffed this up a little bit for this guy.
Doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually another interesting question. So how much of like the player selection process whether it be through the draft or from a trade or from a, evaluation in terms of a promotion, a guy coming up through the ranks, what do you, how much of that are you involved in?
Fortunately, a lot, especially with the combine, our scouting department and management want to know based on particular tests that we see. Because in the combine, there's the performance test, there's the structural movement test between FMS and Y balance test. Then there's also a battery of range of motion tests, anthropometric measurements, and then there's medical screenings. So we look at all of those things. And in the beginning, I thought it was the NFL combine. I thought it was like, this guy can't jump 30 inches. Like, we can't draft this guy, but I was completely wrong.
There's lots of other variables.
Like that kid who can't, bench press his own body weight and jump 30 inches on a vertical jump is going to score you 40 goals.
Right.
Like, that can happen. Kevin Durant couldn't bench 150 or whatever it was in the combine, So I had to kind of temper my thought process from one of our director of scouting has been here for years, and he was awesome. Like, he's helped me understand what their needs are with management and scouting when they draft a guy. They need from me, like, okay, what kind of project is this guy? Is he a 3-year physical project to build him up? Because if you're saying he is, then that's important for us to know, because we know we won't get him for another 3 years to be NHL ready.
Right.
If you're like, this guy's coming from a great college program, he can be ready next year.
Right.
So that's a big difference, And then when we make a trade, I'll get asked, hey, can we find out any information on this particular player? Have they had any injuries? What's their training habits? They're a good culture guy, in the weight room and out of the weight room. So,
yeah, those things just transfer over into so many other things. You're talking about the business of strength and conditioning. Now we're talking about the business of hockey and where the business of strength and conditioning comes into that. It's about reading people. It's about seeing what's on paper. It's about resourcing. It's about interviewing, right? Yep. It's about looking under, the rug, right? Yeah. Looking behind, in the closet and digging down a little bit deeper, and being able to anticipate, and also having some intuition as to what's really going on, that only comes through experience. We talked about sort of getting the buy-in and whatnot. As you're getting these players coming in and you're taking them through your battery of tests to establish baselines, and maybe it's just the interview or the assessment process from like a verbal, assessment process. Getting you guys that come in and they're surprised at how you handle things versus maybe how they've been handled in the past.
From player standpoint?
Yeah, from player standpoint.
Mostly with new NHL guys. There's always been, or guys who leave too. We've gotten compliments on how we do things, and
they don't know until they're gone.
Yeah, they don't know until they're gone. But then it's a cool insight to see what other teams are doing too in their worlds, and you get a snapshot of, okay, what's this, like with Joe? It's like, what's Dallas do? Right. So it's kind of cool to understand and think, all right, well, we gotta do that, and not we gotta do that, but like, okay, we don't
think that way.
Yeah, they're serving 3 meals a day to their players, and they're giving them meals to take home. Like, we probably should look into that for young guys, or we probably should look into a cooking class for young guys so they're well prepared to
imagine that.
Yeah, right. Hello.
Jeez.
Yeah. So little things like that would help prepare them to better be.
Just striving to be better.
Right.
Yep. And not leaving any stone sort of unturned, just like you were doing with your interview process back in.
And even like, if we get a new young player and they come in and I teach them a little bit different variation on an Olympic lift or the way they squat or something like that, I don't shit on wherever they came from. Right. I'm just like, hey, look, here's why we're going to do it this way. Here's what we're going to avoid from an injury standpoint, and here's what's going to transfer to your game.
Right. So in that process, as you're maybe bringing in people from the outside, what is your relationship like and the conversations like with, the other practitioners that are within the organization? I mean, you just told me all the hats that you're wearing when we started this conversation, but look, there's coaching staff, there's management staff, there's ownership. Yep. There's a lot of money on the line. There's everybody's job is on the line at some level. How do those relationships work for you? And, what is the integration of all of that into the strength and conditioning role as it relates to bringing players in and getting better?
Yeah, we put on like a little spider chart, every position that we knew of and how often that position interacts with the other department, and then the other and then the athletes, obviously, first and foremost. So other than athletic training and strength and conditioning, no other department interacts with as much as at least we do, and athletic training, the athletic trainers interact with probably 75% of what strength coaches do. And I'm saying that because we do evaluations for performance. We're at the combine, we're involved with the minor league system, where it's just athletic training is, separate for the two teams, our minor league team and our NHL team. But, I oversee my minor league strength coach. So we're talking with the coaches on evaluations and planning practice. So, it starts to build on how much coverage you have. Nutrition, I've taken that on because one, I think that's a critical part of training and performance, but two, we don't have somebody.
You don't have anybody.
Yeah. So
somebody's got to take the job.
Somebody's got to do it. Right. So, there is a lot to cover. I think the things I try to promote is like you said it before, just communication. So management and coaches get a weekly report, or it's actually 20-game report in a regular season. I tried to do every 10 games last year, to know where the guys are. But even on top of that, I met with the coaches every week on practice and on particular guys if they needed to know. Next year, I'm actually going to step it up and even go 1 week reports, and that's going to be workloads and body weight.
So this is like, let me make sure I'm hearing you right. These are like readiness type reports, or sort of evaluations on. You're looking at all these different variables, right, throughout games, throughout the training sessions.
Yep. All those strength measures we talked about, we capture in season. We're just seeing where it goes. Like, is it dropping below 10%? If so, why? Our readiness questionnaire, our health questionnaire that's subjective to the athletes. How much sleep you're getting? How restful are you? We're doing that at weigh-in every practice day. So we're going to track how much rest they're getting, and that's pretty valuable to us because we've seen sleep scores be reduced by 50% the day after a game as opposed to the day after a practice. So that's massive. So in that, the intervention for us in that is like, we got to practice later on that game, at the day after a game. Let them sleep in. Why are we going to practice at 11 just because we set it up on the calendar? Like and it's funny because we do those subjective sleep scores on the road, and we have, I think I told you guys this, we have the later practice time by default anyway as the visiting NHL team. We have a 1:00 practice. Those sleep scores are 75%.
It's profound.
Right. It's right there, It's like, well, here's the data, So,
so I imagine there actually has to be like, there's a two-way conversation there. This guy is not ready, or he is not at 100%. And this is something we need to be concerned about. So maybe he doesn't get as many minutes, or maybe doesn't play at all. Right. So there's that, but there's also I know what these scores are saying now, or this is where he has been, but I think he's ready to go. And I think we should consider having him out there and having to have that conversation at all those different levels with all those people. Obviously, communication skill is critical, but they got to have your trust. And those are tough conversations.
They're tough conversations, and they're tough to learn how to get to, because it's an art. There's no, you could definitely read communication type books. There's a lot of great, business type books on how to communicate with higher levels of management. There's no doubt, but it's an art.
Because you've got a lot of personalities in there, right?
That's
genders, personalities.
I have all this data that probably says like this guy shouldn't play, but I don't go in there like that. Like I go in and tell the coach, listen, my job is to give you all the information you need to make your decision. And I said, if you don't make the decision the way I would suggest, I don't care. Like I'm just here to help you. You're the decision maker. I stand firmer ground when it's a return to play, a return from injury type situation.
That's a little bit more in your lane and way outside of their lane at that point. Yeah.
Because yes, very much, because we're controlling so many things in the process and stress and how much work volume, intensity volume we want this guy to be able to handle progressively. We can't just throw him into it and all of a sudden he hits the wall again.
Right.
So that would be foolish. So, but when I bring the information of a player who's usually getting a lot of minutes and he's in the tank technically, he may be sick, right? So he may be fighting through a flu bug or something, but he may go out and play even better. Who knows? So you have to do a little bit of digging, but also don't don't take it too personal if the coach doesn't follow your lead,
Don't get your feelings hurt.
Right, exactly. I mean, my feelings get hurt in the return to play situations when I'm like, listen, here's the consequences if we deviate from this program, And I like to overcook things anyway. If the medical team says he's ready next week, I'm like, nope, following week,
10 days.
Yeah, 10 more days. Yeah. Let's prove it to me then, So rather than him going out and compromising his health or that injury again. So, but it is an art. If you're a young strength coach, like you gotta grab some veteran strength coaches and ask those questions. In our hockey, our strength coaches, an NHL strength coaches podcast that we have, I asked that to older coaches. I'm like, tell me about tough situations. How did you navigate those tough situations? You don't have to give me names. You don't have to, just how did you navigate those? Like, how do you tell one of the most badass coaches in the NHL, his best player is not ready, and what do you have to back that up? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you can only go in with, I guess what you just said, I can only imagine. It's like, look, man, I know your job is to put this team in the best position to win, not just tonight, but into the future. I'm going to tell it to you how it is. I mean, you doing anything less than that is doing a disservice to the player, 100%. To the team, to the coach. It's being dishonest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you have a problem,
and it's fearful, like you got to overcome that fear and be able to have some balls to have that conversation and tell them what they don't want to hear.
Yeah, totally. Because listen,
I tell my wife that all the time.
She just has a little bit different take, I'm sure. But also, like, when the shit hits the fan and the team's doing lousy and players are getting hurt and we don't have our best players on the ice or the court or the field or whatever. The strength coaches are the ones that get their asses handed to them. It's usually, this got to get cut.
First,
like, it's like, hey, this is your problem. Yeah. This is your fault. What the hell is going on? So if you haven't had those conversations, I'm not saying it's a cover my ass type of situation.
Oh, it is.
But it is. So you have to make no mistake about it as a coach, right? It's the same as if you're a leader at a company, right?
You have to be prepared.
You have to do your research. Yeah. You have to have the data in front of you. You have to be able, you have to have backstops. You have to go back and say, here's what I've communicated and here's why I've communicated it. And by the way, if I'm not communicating in a way to you that's productive for you, please tell me how I can be better. Yeah. Again, not having your feelings hurt, but then also not being afraid to say, no, man, I think you're wrong. And I think there'd be a big mistake if you do this. It's not a personal thing. Yeah. That is me just trying to help you.
You hit the nail on the head. 8 years ago, I was challenged by my GM. We had I think it was, it might've been 7. It was Todd McClellan's last year. We didn't make the playoffs. It was my first experience not making the playoffs.
That was a rough year, yeah.
Yeah. So I was challenged by the GM. So he's like, I need more numbers. I need more updates. I wasn't really staying religious on my my 20-game report. You know? I was giving reports, but it wasn't at that regular interval, and I wasn't really capturing a lot of the strength numbers in the way I do now. I wasn't recording a lot of them. I wasn't doing velocity.
So your system was different.
It was different. It was. I was drinking through the fire hose. Like I'm like, trying to do everything.
What's important?
It was only me at the time. I didn't have an assistant. I had a minor league guy who was across the country because our team was in Massachusetts, our minor league team at the time. So I'm like, okay, this is what I can give them on a regular interval to tell them where the players are at. But it's much easier to, at the time, have a one-on-one conversation. But that's difficult to try to lock down management for that type of conversation, right? So he challenged me to create a better report, and I was like, reluctant, like, okay, I'll do it.
It's more work, right?
Like, yeah. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is how am I going to do this? I'm going to test in season. What does he think? Blah blah blah. But turns out I get into it. I'm like, you know what? I should be thanking him right.
He was right.
He was right. He was right. And I feel like it stepped my game up in season, because that's when I thought, as strength coaches, we love the off season. We can do so much in the off season. That's our time to shine. Yeah, that's our time to shine. That's what we're hired for. But in the NHL, and probably even in pro sports, every pro sport, especially 82 game season pro sports and 160 in baseball, you flip it. I have these guys for 9 months, and I don't have them for 3 months. Another strength coach has them.
Right.
So this is my time to track them. becomes my off season.
It's critical.
Yeah.
It's critical.
So I have to figure out better intervals on how to track these types of things, and figure out what I wanted to track to share with them. So that's how it really got my process of evaluating and sharing and communicating kicked off.
So for those new young coaches that are coming up, What advice can you give them about like how to know what's important with all the variables that are out there? How do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know what's important and how to track it and when to provide that information?
You need to know your domains, right, for your particular sport. So I always want to give a body composition, a health, which comes into our questionnaire, like how are you sleeping? How are you feeling? Are you getting enough sleep hours? Guys are actually awesome in the fact that they're honest. And what's their power scores in season? We do it at monthly intervals, right? And I think I mentioned speed, but what's your profile? If you can get an exercise that's embedded into the program, because we don't stop everything and test in season. It's a program. It's the program's written up.
This had to happen a long time ago. By the time you're in season, if you didn't do it already, it's too late.
Well, we're tracking. Yeah, I mean, you should come in with these numbers at a high level, and we're just measuring drop off throughout the whole year anyway. And if we see excessive drop off beyond 10% of their best score for that particular test or exercise, then we'll have a conversation. We'll say what's going on, check injuries, check their sleep, check their nutrition, right? Maybe it's fatigue and burnout. Maybe we check resting heart rate levels. We'll check, recovery scores, or resting HRV. Yep. So we'll do that as an intervention. So it gives us a place to look, blood work if we need it. We've gotten into that a lot. And so once you know your domains, then your exercises will plug in. Mine will be different than yours, but as long as you can create that profile for the guy, then it's taking the preseason testing profile that we do, and we're just shrinking it down to do something that we can realistically do in the chaos of the season. And that's the attack plan.
Couple more questions here. You mentioned quite a few things that we're talking about biometrics. I mean, there's the obvious things I think most people would kind of tie in, which would be, speed, strength, power, agility, quickness, specific skill, testing management, testing and management that might be going on. But you mentioned some other things biometrically. You talked about sleep. You talked about stress. You talked about heart rate variability, resting heart rate during, practice or during a session versus not.
We track recovery heart rates in practice.
So of all the things, and I've just probably scratched the surface on a good number of them, but not all of them, what is the key indicator for you as a strength coach that plays into performance for your athlete?
Yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent.
If I had to pick one, the question's like, what's the most important minute of the game?
Yeah.
And the kid raises his hand. No, the first minute. Not all of them. So, but
if you said all of them, you said the first minute.
So, if I had to pick one, and it's going to go into a point that you mentioned, but I missed saying something about it, is the heart rate recovery in practice. I've been able to lean on our practice script and what we've tracked from heart rate in practice for markers of recovery in ways that save my ass. Because when the shit hits the fan, like you said earlier, like they're going to point the finger at us. Well, we're out of shape. That's the default answer for coaches and management. It sucks. It's 2021.
But it's the reality.
So until you can educate your staffs about, hey, this is what we're looking at, and we've done a good job about it. And I think they know what to look for. And I purposely give them that information in the report so they know what to look for. When I first got here, it was VO2 test. Everybody's got to have a VO2 over 65. I'm like, well, what if they're not powerful? What if they're not fast? So let's worry about anaerobic threshold and that sprint, anaerobic high shift like energy system first. And they're like, okay, so they educated as to why we do that. But with the heart rate recovery checks, when I get and I have gotten this, and I'm speaking from experience, they're like, we're out of shape. I'm like, really? What was the hardest practice we had? This date. I'm like, okay, 2 days ago. So we look.
Then you go through
every single guy. And I'm like, 60 beats in a minute, 70 beats in a minute. After the toughest drill, I'm like,
nope.
We did not get out of shape in 2 days.
No.
We did not get out of shape.
What happened 2 days before that?
Exactly. So, and we keep looking, and it's like, you can't, and there's been times where I'm like, we can't use this as an excuse. Like, because I know what they're doing in the gym. Have they missed any practices? The coach is like, no. I'm like, well, we didn't get out of shape.
Yeah.
We're tired.
Something's going on.
Yes,
right?
yeah, something's
wrong, and it's not. You can't be defaulted to we're out of shape.
Exactly.
That diagnostic, that check and balance system is so important. I mean, you said HRV and or heart rate recovery during challenge. I would have
HRV and resting heart rate are 1A and 1B.
Right.
You know,
so like, close. I guess what I almost expected you to say was sleep. However, based on how you just walked through that discovery process, it very well could be sleep, and it's showing up here with the recovery. Like what happened 2 days before, we were on a road trip. These guys didn't sleep, or this particular athlete didn't sleep. Right. Well, why isn't he sleeping? Well, because last week he got his nose broken and he can't breathe out of his nose. Right. So he's got sleep apnea and he's not sleeping. So now we go, well, let's get this guy, a CPAP machine or something in the meantime to keep him breathing. And you can see it happen. But it always takes longer to recover from those discoveries or those things than it does for them to happen. So God, you got to be on top of that stuff all the time. Right?
Another coach may use their catapult data from practice.
Gotcha.
They may see, speed and ground cover decrease, and they could probably most certainly relate that to, all right, there's some fatigue going on. We're not in the same drills. We're not moving as fast, or we're not covering as much ground, and we're not handling force as much and change of direction. So it's the metric that you can lean on and put some validity to, and make sure it's clean, and not just pull it out of the sky. Yeah,
that's the last question on that then. So like specific to that, what type of technology or devices can you use to track that? Like for coaches that are like, oh, that's really interesting, I'm not doing that with my athletes now, or I should be doing more of that. What have you had the most success with in terms of tracking that? And this might be sports specific because of what you can, I guess I'm alluding maybe to wearables.
Right.
And what you can do, what the league will allow you to use, and what you can't do.
Yeah, that's a good point. We haven't even talked about the CBA, but the players have to be willing to wear a heart rate monitor during practice and wear a GPS type tracking unit in practice. And we get great compliance. We haven't been able to get to the point financially where we commit to like a catapult, but we've used it in a bunch of different situations. And that would be my next purchase. Like, we need this because we're getting an internal monitor from the heart rate, the data there, but we need an external kind of load. Like, how much does change of direction cost? How much does up and down the ice at full speed cost? And what are full speeds? Right. We don't want to go hit our full speed in the first week of the preseason or the first week of the season in practice and train that quality. And all of a sudden, 2 months later, we haven't touched it. Right. It's like hitting a PR in October and being like in December 1. Hey, I'm going to try it again. Why not? I haven't touched the weight in 2 months.
Zero sense.
Exactly.
Makes zero sense.
So that's my goal. And now the fortunate thing is that they're tracking the players with a chip inside the jerseys during the game. So the cost of doing business. Like, what speeds they're going to get in a game in that environment. So now we can really compare. Are we training at the same stimulus? So we'll get there. I know we will, but it is a valuable tool. You just have to pick the one that is the most valid. Like, there's a standard of error with each of them. Pick the one that doesn't have the most, I guess, right? Connexon's a radio frequency device. That's a chip. They wear it. Again, Catapult is you can tie it into the ceiling and have it act like GPS with clear sky. So that motion sensor, there's
different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to find out what's available to you, what makes the most sense, what's going to give you the most valuable bang for your buck, and feedback mechanism and so forth, so that you can do your job and be successful. What are you excited about right now as we're moving? You've got stuff going on. I mean, again, this is the time to shine. You get to geek out, nerd out a little bit. It's less about watching the drop off and people falling apart, and more about let's do better next year and build them up so they don't do that as quickly or avoid that. So there's that going on. There's a new season upon us. That means changes. That means stuff. What are you excited about as a coach moving into the end of 2021 and 2022?
We put a lot of effort into individualizing a program and based on strength qualities that we think the player needs, right? So, we have guys who need more hypertrophy. We may have guys who need more strength overall. We have guys who need more speed, right? So we've actually built blocks and programmed them and deliver them through Bridge Athletic in the off season to deliver those to each of those guys. So we're excited to see how those things shape out and how they come back and how they test. I mean, I think it's truly a development type model, but at least gives them blocks that they need, and we're not just going with, hypertrophy, strength, power, the typical, Mike Stone, NSCA, 1990.
It's antiquated.
No, So we need to be a little more specific if we truly want to get more miles out of these guys. So that's exciting. Looking into building that profile of what we look at for a hockey player is exciting. I told you about that 1080 sprint machine. So we're gonna kind of, it'll help us understand, okay, where are they accumulating speed throughout a certain distance? Maybe they're not the best starter, so maybe we got to do rate of force.
There's a leakage somewhere.
Right. Maybe we got to do more high force sled push, heavy sled push to get them off the line quick and get them to apply force into the ground. Maybe they need more elasticity for later parts of absolute speed. So that'll be kind of exciting to see and develop and learn how to utilize it and apply it.
I think that's the thing all strength coaches want to do, right? They want to play with the toys, and they want to geek out on the numbers and see results. So it's not restocking Gatorades and shake machines and mopping floors.
Well, you got people to do that now.
I'm sure. Hey, there's a little bit of that's got to happen in the off season too. So I'm sure you're doing that, man.
That's right.
Listen, man, getting you wrapped up here and getting you on with your day to your family. I want to thank you for coming down. This has been so fun for me, and next time we do this, we'll have to grab a cigar and a whiskey, take the headsets with the mics. We'll sit out in the yard and we'll do it some more. Maybe we can talk. You can help me nerd out on some of this performance data. I'd love to get into it, but I mean, this was extraordinarily educational for me, and I bet for a lot of other people. If people want to find out a little bit more about you, Mike, or listen to you, or maybe talk with you, or maybe have you speak, or something like that, where should they look for you, man?
I'm on Twitter, Mike Potenza, at Mike Potenza, and then you can email me too, mpotenza@sjsharks.com. Reach out, and that's pretty easy to find me there, right? I'm always on that email, like my wife says. And then we have a cool collection of strength coaches. Our association is the strength and conditioning coaches of professional hockey, and I'm pretty proud of that because we built it together, right? It's the only other pro sport league strength coaches are together, but we've made a website where we're all offering content. Every NHL coach, every American League strength coach,
awesome.
and private hockey strength coaches are putting content for it to be the best location for hockey training. And we have a good podcast. We have a good forum to talk about questions and stuff like that. So I encourage people to get on that and see what we're doing, and they can reach out to me directly because we have a connect with the coach function. So if you're into hockey and you train and you live in British Columbia and you have a small private business and you want to talk to Mike Potenza, or you want to talk to Kevin Neal, the Boston Bruins strength coach, you can go to the forum, send us a direct message, and then you're going to get a conversation with them.
It's so awesome.
Is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is awesome.
We're pretty proud of that, and it's going pretty well.
This has been my experience with hockey. I've been involved with a lot of other professional level teams, but hockey particularly, there's a different culture. It's you kind of mentioned it. It's a little bit more of a blue collar group. People grew up. You mentioned getting your brother's hand-me-downs. That's a very common tale. Parents work hard so that their kids can play hockey, and then they take that to the league, and then they've got what you have is a strong community of people. And some of that community is even come through here when they've been out, on the road.
Yeah.
Jamie Rodriguez came through from the Rangers, right? Yeah. Rennigan came through at some point. Yeah. And these are guys, by the way, that came through San Jose.
Right. They were part of my staff.
At some point. Yeah. So, I mean, and God, what great guys, that are just, they're eager to share. So, I mean, you heard it, people. Like, if you want to, what an awesome opportunity.
Please reach out.
Yeah, reach out.
I appreciate being here. I appreciate, you being a neighbor, you and Cece being a neighbor. It's great to, talk shop and meet and have coffee, and it's good. It's just not being from here. It's reassuring to have that relationship. So thank you.
Likewise, brother. You're welcome here anytime. Like I said, cigars or no cigars, we should do.
We gotta have a cigar and whiskey night.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You talked me into it. We should do it.
We'll put a sign out front. Place to be packed.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, man. No problem. You're awesome. I love you, brother.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Iron Sights. If you enjoyed our conversation, you can support our mission by hitting the subscribe button, leaving a review, and sharing the podcast with a friend. I'll see you on the next episode.